I thought I had the perfect weekend lined up. Two movies, two museums, one big sense of progress. But one email and a hole in my shoe forced me to rethink everything. But before I tell you all about that weekend and how I adapted and ultimately decided I'm going to have to wait for some things and go out of my way to do other things, be sure to give this video a like. Comment what you think about all this. Subscribe for cultural commentary and rants from a man caught between generations. And last but certainly not least, feel free to join me at the Zillennial Nexus Point Discord. Link will be in the description below. So yeah, for context, last Friday, I signed up for both the Museum of Science membership that I've been talking about and the aquarium one. The museum sent me my digital member card right away, which I was able to add to my Apple Wallet, and now I can get free exhibit halls admission whenever I want, or probably just once per day. Meanwhile, the aquarium is making me wait a full week for that digital member card. I mean, they said I could have my information looked up at the front desk, but something about how the FAQ said 48 hours to get in the system had me hesitant about it. So here's how that weekend ultimately went. On Saturday morning, I went out to AMC at the Boston Common as usual for my early morning showing, 10:30 a.m., of Bone Lake. I'd originally booked the 11:30 a.m. show, but earlier that week, they shuffled a bunch of screenings around, and so the 11:30 disappeared, but there was a 10:30. So I decided to cancel the vanished showing to be on the safe side, and then rebook the 10:30 one. While I was in the concession line, I checked my email and I saw that my planned screening at the same location for Avatar The Way of Water in IMAX 3D the next day had been canceled. And instead of it just staying there, AMC canceled it for me and then issued, well, I wouldn't call it a refund, but they said a refund, but it was probably an automated email that said $0 was the total. So really, it just freed back up a A-list slot. When I said technical error in it, I thought it might have been projector failure or the Taylor Swift album launch party hijacking it, but no. Later I found out it was the Smashing Machine had taken that time slot for an IMAX screening. So before I bought my concessions, I went on the app and checked where else I could see Avatar 2 in IMAX 3D. Causeway was out of the question, obviously, but both South Bay and Assembly Row up in Somerville had it playing at 1:45 p.m. in IMAX 3D. So really it was just a question of which one to go to. I looked at the public transportation and I decided I would much rather just get off the Orange Line at Assembly Row in Somerville than get off the Red Line Andrews stop and then walk nearly a mile to get to South Bay. So I booked my showing in Somerville and then went about the rest of my Bone Lake screening. Finished my popcorn before the movie started. Then the movie was kind of mid. But hey, at least I was able to book another Avatar 2 screening right away. Anyway, this is actually why I track 5 different locations. I have 5 different locations bookmarked in my AMC app. Boston Common, primary location. Causeway, backup if I don't care about seeing it in IMAX or Dolby. And then South Bay and Assembly Row are my IMAX and Dolby backups. Oh, and I have one near my grandparents in Florida bookmarked, just in case. Yeah, I'm actually looking at Causeway for anything that isn't playing in IMAX or Dolby because it's a lot closer to the Museum of Science. Anyway, after the movie, Bone Lake that is, and a quick lunch at Burger King using my last coupon, I took the subway up to the Museum of Science, but I had to get off one stop early because everything past that was under maintenance that weekend. So I walked by the AMC at Causeway, and I was really impressed at how basically North Station, the TD Garden, the AMC, the supermarket, Star Market, and so many other places were all layered on top of each other along Causeway Street. I did have to deal with a little bit of quite a bit more foot traffic because there was a Bruins game that day, but I made it to the Museum of Science on foot, presented my ticket, and then I was able to go straight into the exhibit halls where I went straight to the Theater of Electricity for the 2 o'clock lightning presentation. And I've talked about in the past how on Halloween I had to stand in the back because I got there too late, and there were a whole bunch of school field trips there that day. So I had to stand in the back of the Theater of Electricity for the lightning presentation. Then when I went to adult night, I thought I might be able to get a front row seat this time. No, bunch of adults got the front row seats before me, and then me and my friend had to stand in the back again. But this time, I got there 20 minutes before it started. I was able to just grab a seat in the front row. Man, it felt so good to get that front row seat, and you could really get a better appreciation for everything. After the presentation, I had a nice talk with the presenter about the Tesla coils that she brought up, and I asked if they were a precursor to modern wireless charging, like the very same MagSafe charger I have my phone charging on right now, actually. But she said she'd have to get back to me on whether MagSafe or wireless charging in general, the Qi standard, is in any way connected to the Tesla coils, which she should be able to do because I'm a member, and she said she would get back to me, probably because I'm likely to see her at a later presentation, because I'm going to go to the lightning presentations as much as possible. Probably not every single time if I go to the museum for some period of time before or after my Saturday movie, or at some point on Sunday if I decide I want to spend the whole day there, or half the day after going to the aquarium in the morning. Yeah, it might not be the best idea to go to the lightning presentation 2 times a week every week because I'm reasonably certain that might not be good for my hearing. Let me know in the comments if you think that's a good idea for my hearing, especially if I go see a movie in IMAX. Actually, speaking of IMAX, I used my first $2 member ticket to go see Space, the New Frontier at the Mugar Omni Theater. That's the one voice narrated by Chris Pine. And I realized something I'm going to talk about in a separate video about how I approach life similar to how NASA uses incremental approaches for their missions. Again, I'm going to talk more about that in a separate video. Then I went to see One Sky at the planetarium after a snack break where I used my member discount on Dippin' Dots, and even with that, for those in a can of water, because they have canned water there instead of bottled, Dippin' Dots are overpriced. I'm going to stick to the vending machines from now on. But getting back to the shows that I went to see One Sky at the planetarium, and there were these parents with children who were about 4 or 5 years old who kept on being disruptive even after the show had begun. And I have to say, they did the right thing by leaving the planetarium when they realized that they were not going to be able to have those kids sit down and be quiet, which is why they actually have this children specific planetarium show featuring Big Bird. Like, that's the one I would recommend you bring children of that age to, based on the fact that in the information it says preschool, kindergarten, and 1 through 5, grades 1 through 5 for the age range for that. Then everything else, like Undiscovered Worlds, One Sky, etc., say all ages. I'm glad the environment was distraction free so I could appreciate the immersion of the planetarium. And I got to see what the night sky would look like without light pollution and such. Anyway, after all that, I took the subway back to the South Station to get home, where I had some nice exchanges with out of towners, proving that small connections remind you that going out creates its own community, even if you never see them again. Also, when we got back to the South Station, I helped guide this couple to the train I was headed to because their stop was along that same train, just a lot further out than mine. So I helped them find the train because I'm a nice guy. Anyway, the next day on Sunday, while I was at Dunkin' for breakfast, I considered walking to a bus station and using that to get to the Orange Line so that I could make the 9:30 a.m. Assembly Row screening of Avatar 2. But my unfamiliarity with it and timing and budget constraints led me to decide to explore the bus routes another time. Like, I was actually looking through them recently. I think that the bus might be a good way to bridge the gap between the Andrew Red Line Station and South Bay if I decide I want to go see a movie there. And I can't wait for the very specific times that the line that the stop that it's on the commuter rail happen to align. I always leave a 15-minute error margin to be safe, but I digress. Anyway, when I took my usual commuter rail train into South Station, I decided to skip the aquarium for now because I didn't want to have to deal with the headache of explaining my situation, hoping my name was in the system, and then going from there. When I got to South Station, I finally bought a plastic Charlie card that I could use and reload as needed because I was getting tired of having to get the paper Charlie tickets and then have them pile up in my pockets. Anyway, after that, I walked to the Boston Common, stopping at the Chinatown Dunkin' for a quick morning snack, redeeming points for a free donut, and buying a bottle of water. And I just hung out at the Boston Common where I sat down a lot more because my shoes were getting really worn out, and at that point, there was a literal hole in my right one, and it was getting kind of painful to walk if I was being completely honest. So, as anyone in 2025 is likely to do, I consulted AI, and one of Grok's suggestions was a band aid patch. Apparently, if you put a band aid over the hole of a shoe from inside the shoe, that seals it up. I wouldn't recommend it to prolong the use of really worn out shoes, but if you need a quick fix for a day, you can do that, especially because most places like the Boston Common Visitor Center or any restaurant around the Boston Common is likely to just be able to give you a band aid if you need one. The visitor center staff was kind enough to supply me with two band aids, and I was able to improvise a fix for my shoe. It felt so nice to be able to just walk normally again, and they lasted a lot less longer than my previous pair did. I think my previous pair lasted for over a year. This one, I think it was like 8 or 9 months. Again, I've stepped up the amount of walking that I do. Well, after fixing my shoes for at least the rest of that day, I went to McDonald's for lunch, and then I went up to the Orange Line in Chinatown to get to Assembly Row, which my sister was nice enough to confirm that, one, she goes there quite a bit, so she knows that it's there, and two, that they have the fare vending machines in case something goes wrong with my Charlie card, because I talked about in my first subway ride video about how one of my tickets that I bought 2 rides on just wouldn't work for one of the booths, so I had to go and buy a new ticket for the new ride. Turns out, I probably just had to go to a different line because someone who was waiting for the Orange Line train with me said that sometimes the Charlie card or ticket NFC point just messes up. Thankfully, it didn't end up costing me more money like it did the previous time, though. At this point, I am considering the $11 24-hour pass every single time I get into South Station so that I can just take the red line to the Boston Common or the subway to wherever I need to go, whether I decide I want to go all the way up to North Station to get to Causeway for the AMC. Or I decide I want to go to the museum before a movie, I want to go to the museum after a movie. I'd probably still walk to the aquarium because every time I put in transit directions from South Station on the Apple Maps app, it just says to walk to the aquarium. But yeah, I eventually got to Assembly Row, walked around for a bit, saw the giant Lego giraffe, and saw that the Lego Discovery Center has their own adult night. Add that to the Children's Museum and the Museum of Science for places that are, I wouldn't say primarily intended for children, but very kid friendly. Okay, the Children's Museum, the name literally, it's literally in the name. That is literally a place for children. And they had an adult night where adults could experience the museum for whatever reason. Don't ask me why. They just decided to do that. Now, the Museum of Science, that's a little more understandable for an adult night because, well, I'm an adult. I like going to the Museum of Science, not just for the nostalgia, but because it's a lot more stimulating for my brain than the quick dopamine hits of other things on the internet that we're not going to talk about. But getting back to Assembly Row, when I got into the IMAX theater, I immediately thought I was going to have to talk to management because there was this unfiltered family that we'll call them. They were sitting right at the entrance. The kid was being rowdy, and the mother was oversharing very personal information that I could hear from almost the opposite side of the auditorium. If you want an idea of how far away they were, but I could still hear the very inappropriate conversation that the mother of the kid was having with her mother slash the kid's grandmother. They were right next to the door. I was at almost the opposite end, about 5 rows back, I think, because I couldn't get too close to the center this time because I had to book the tickets about 24 hours ahead. Usually I book them by Wednesday when all the show times are finalized, but anyway, the way they were behaving was so disruptive, the kid and the adults, that I seriously considered getting up, reporting them to management, and having them show them the metaphorical yellow card before the previews even began so that I could get ahead of it. What made the lead up to the movie even worse was I saw someone who I am 95% certain was Buzzkill Lightyear. I'm not kidding. He looked like the same guy, but thankfully, once the movie started, The IMAX sound consumed everything. The chaos turned to peace as I immersed myself in the world of Pandora for the next 3 hours and 15 minutes. There was maybe one or two phone uses a couple rows in front of me, and I do not recall a single instance of the unfiltered family disrupting the actual movie. Either they were all on their best behavior by that point, because what really had me worried by then was during the previews, I heard the kids shout, "Just start the movie!" By the time the lights came back on and the credits rolled, they were long gone by the looks of it. So either the kid was being disruptive and the adults decided to just leave early to avoid rewarding that kind of behavior, and out of respect for everyone else in the auditorium, like the parents at the planetarium the previous day, or it was something else. I don't know. I just know that they did not ruin my experience once the movie began, for which I am grateful. Anyway, Avatar 2 in IMAX 3D, beautiful. Can't wait to see Avatar 3 like that. Hopefully at the Boston Common and not Assembly Row or South Bay. I took the Orange Line back to where I started. I went to Sal's Pizza near the Boston Common for dinner. And this was the latest I had been out in the city for a while, or at least the latest I'd been out with how dark it was. I took an alternate line home, and my dad gave me a ride home, where I got to enjoy the cannolis I bought at Sal's and carried all the way home. Anyway, the weekend taught me to adapt, not to master. The world doesn't feel larger yet, but it could once I figure out the bus system, which could allow me to go to South Bay if they're the only IMAX screen showing what I want to see in IMAX. I'm going to leave it here for the video. I'll talk more about when I finally go to the aquarium, and how I make going to the aquarium, the AMC, and the Museum of Science all work out. Be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Comment your thoughts on all this. Subscribe for cultural commentary and rants from a man caught between generations. And last but certainly not least, feel free to join me at the Zillennial Nexus Point Discord. Link will be in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.